Hello out there. My name is Laolu Akonde, and you are on to Inside Sources. But first, here is my take for today entitled The Buhari Story and Nigeria's Way Forward. President Muhammadu Buhari, who had the unique life opportunity to govern Nigeria for almost 10 years, both as a dictator and a democrat, second only to President Olusegun Obasanjo in that regard, has now passed. He died 2 years after his time as civilian president for 8 straight years. He got a top-notch state burial, courtesy of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who acquitted himself so well on this score, setting a new precedent. In fact, Buhari's burial was rightly described by this day newspaper as, quote-unquote, a blaze of glory, causing the grandson of late President Shehu Shagari, Mr. Nura Muhammad Mahi, to publicly complain that Shagari did not receive such height of honor when he passed. The media put it this way, and I quote, "Shagari's grandson hails Tinubu for honoring Buhari, slams past neglect of his grandfather." In any case, many of the political leaders of the day have spoken so well and so highly of late President Buhari, and that is fitting. However, the best tribute every political elite who spoke glowingly about Buhari can pay to him now is to work hard and fulfill the promise of change which Buhari was the arrowhead of in 2015. Especially those of us who were on the same side with him in that quest. We have a duty to get the job done. The clamor in 2015 was a national one. It rallied the whole nation, and rightly so. It was a rare opportunity. The nation was tottering on the verge of incredible corruption scandals, worsening insurgency, and an unimpactful, even if marginal, economic growth. When oil sales were selling above $100 at the international market, public resources in this country were not going to pay for public needs. They were not going to pay for social services. So much that there was a truly national rallying point against the then ruling PDP and the then President Goodluck Jonathan. Jonathan lost the election, not surprisingly, but he managed to supersize his image, becoming a true statesman forever with the classy manner Jonathan considered the election. It was like Jonathan decided that he would not be in the way of Nigeria's national consensus for change, and we must give him kudos for that. But the situation in the federal government then was so bad. In fact, on assumption of office in May 29, 2015, many of the suspected perpetrators took cover afraid of what the consequences might be with President Buhari in office. Inside the government, the president and his deputy, Professor Oshibajo, they were looking for money to pay the salaries of over 20 states where the workers had not been paid for several months. It was that bad. The Buhari administration, which I served, found the money to pay the states in what we now know as the bailout for the states. And then 17 local government areas in the northeast that were under Boko Haram were liberated. And within a year in office, the Buhari administration launched the largest social safety net initiative ever in sub-Saharan Africa with the social investment program under the office of the vice president, where I worked. Then there were also significant infrastructure, road and rail, that took place in an unprecedented manner in this country. But 10 years after all of that and the exciting national groundswell of 2015 and those early feats that I mentioned, so much more was expected of the Buhari administration, and those had not actually happened. The big change that we all expected hasn't happened yet. In between then and now, many of the PDP top-notchers who the 2015 wave of change ought to have blown away came back and joined APC ruling party. So much so that today, no one can say that there is any significant ideological difference between the APC and the PDP. And now recently, there has been a new rallying point of politicians who are no longer with the ruling APC coming together under the new coalition party called ADC. But the fervor is certainly not as it was in 2015, mainly because once beaten, Nigerians are now twice shy. The leaders of the opposition have not been able to rally a national clamor. Yet, what is undeniable today is the palpable discontent and suffering caused by the living conditions across this country. It's really bad. So what will be useful for the Nigerian people now is for the Tinubu presidency to move decisively to rekindle the hopes and the expectations that the Buhari wave of 2015 represented, but didn't quite manage to deliver in 8 years. At least it is still the same political party that is in power at the center. Like I have said here over and again, the president still has 2 years. If the APC and the Tinubu administration manage to do this, it will be the best tribute to the memory of Buhari, who certainly meant well for Nigeria, but didn't quite manage to deliver as much as was promised and as much as was expected. The alternative is for the new coalition to align itself with the hearts and minds of Nigerians away from what already seems like a gang up against the incumbent president. All that Nigerians want is a true change, and I line up right behind that with anyone truly committed to that change. It's the change that we've been searching for. That is why the future of Nigeria is our theme here on Inside Sources. And there you have it. Inside Sources will be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today we are having a special edition discussing the life and times of the immediate past president of the country who had just passed away, as we talk about the future of the country and other issues. To join me in that very important conversation is somebody who had worked with the then Major General Buhari as head of state, and also somebody who worked with him towards the end of his presidency. I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources a prominent and eminent Nigerian scholar, ambassador, and several many things that time will not allow us to get into the detail of. But I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources Professor Ibrahim Agbola Gambari. Prof, you're welcome back to Inside Sources.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back here. Thank you. And I can see that you have moved the bar, raised the bar with this, and I hope you continue to do so.
Thank you so much.
For the benefit of viewers and public education in our country.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. So let's just start about with the passing of President Buhari. You know, both of us served under its presidency. And I wanted to just ask you, just to open up that, what do you think is one of the more important features of the late president that Nigerians don't pay enough attention to, based on the fact that you worked with him when he was head of state? You were the Foreign Affairs Minister, and I remember then that you used to have very regular meetings with him one-on-one because of the role that you played. And then you were also his chief of staff, in the last 2-3 years of his administration.
Well, thank you very much, Laulu. But actually, you worked longer than me with the late president. You started right from the beginning.
Yeah.
I joined the last 3 years of that administration, but you are right that I had the honor and privilege to work with him much earlier. I used to say in that cabinet, the last cabinet, that I was first the second oldest in that cabinet after Buhari, but I was also the one who has worked with him longer than anyone else, because we started in 1984, involuntarily terminated in 1985, but 35 years later, he called on me to come and join him, in his own words, to come back to Nigeria that have done too many years in the United Nations solving other people's problems. Let me come back to Nigeria and suffer with him. And it was true because, in a sense, by the time we came back together, Nigeria has changed Africa has changed, the world has changed, he himself has changed, I have changed. But one thing that has been very constant was that, and not generally well known, those of us who served in the cabinet of 1984-85, this was a military government. We were not members of the Supreme Military Council, we were Federal Executive Council, but they met regularly without fail. And
was it also Wednesday?
Every Wednesday. But we were civilians I was in a military government. And yet, if you look at the record of that, all of us participated. So he ran the cabinet as a Democrat. He allowed everybody to talk, and he would sum up. But nonetheless, there was nobody in that cabinet who did not feel that he had a contribution to make, and made them, you know. Sometimes, and you can go and check the records, there are times when he bring memos, at least on 3 occasions, when some of us bloody civilians and the soldiers will call us, will criticize and attack it, and withdrew
the president's
memo and withdrew it. He was a military head of state, so, but he believed in this collegial attitude, which I believe I saw again when I joined in the last 3 years of administration. Cabinet met every Wednesday, and then when he presided, he gave everybody the chance. Similarly, in the National Security Council meetings, which I don't know, Laudo, if you attended, everybody goes around and gives their views, so nobody could say it was not heard. You know, nobody would say, and that's one character of the late president. People underrated. They think, oh yes, he has extreme views. Some people feel he doesn't do anything, he doesn't know anything. Well, that's absolutely contrary to the fact. He read his memos carefully. He came prepared. His staff do their work, but he came prepared. Many people don't realize that. Secondly, he had a tremendous sense of humor, which again, many people who are not close don't realize. He is a very kind person. He didn't like to fire anybody. I mean, I joined the last 3 years, but during those 3 years, there were only 2 ministers that were dropped.
Oh, yeah.
And because he always is very concerned about the impact of sake on the families, on people and their families, you know. Yeah. And then there's another dimension to it, Laulu, that he felt he appointed them. So, and he takes responsibility for appointing them. Yeah. So, really, how can he then just be sacking people? Because that's a reflection of his judgment in the first instance. Give you another example. When he felt that he had to relieve the service chiefs from their position, he found ways to try to retain them in the service by appointing them ambassadors to the neighboring countries. Yeah. So you had the ambassadors, you put them in Niger, in Chad, in Ghana, in Benin, and Cameroon. Cameroon. Yeah. So it was a very humane person. And so, frankly speaking, I wish that I could have sacked more people. But, to even show that, as an interesting aside, is that I came to, in May 2020, and it's only then that 2 ministers were sacked. So some people attributed that to me, that this Gambari's influence. Well, to be honest with you, I saw the shortcomings of one of them in particular, where it's now no longer a secret that twice in the cabinet, the president asked him, Mr. Minister, why did you not inaugurate the board of this power company?
Yes.
And twice, and the man still did not inaugurate them. So, I will have...
After the president has
publicly in the council
twice.
Twice. I will have, to me, just sacked, really. But he's very humane. And I guess that's also a reflection of realizing that Nigeria is such a a complex country in the sense that the diversity, and sometimes they need to be inclusive and carry everybody along. And after all, don't forget, our Constitution also provides for that. Says there shall be a minister from each, at least one minister from each state of the federation. So the representative nature, the expectation that cabinet will work in that space, so everybody will feel a sense of belonging, a sense of participation. So those are some of the characteristics that are not often very well known outside.
I remember that he was approached, you know, during when he was president, that the service chiefs were taking too long. You know, it was affecting the hierarchy, the order in the military, the number of years that service chiefs were supposed to be in office, and how that affected the promotion of people coming behind. And then there are also even the views in the public that, well, maybe these service chiefs needed to be changed to bring a new vigor. You know, maybe they were, you know, not being as effective as before, you know, and there was there was a national clamor. Fire these service chiefs. So he didn't fire them. So ultimately, when he fired them, I understand it was asked that. So eventually, why did you not fire? Why did you not fire the service chiefs? And he said that, well, people wanted me to fire them.
And that's why, you know, people, he was pained that the security situation deteriorated. He felt he did his best.
After the initial, clearly, initially there was a...
And then, obviously, he was very pained. I was looking for ways, okay, maybe it's equipment. There's nothing the military asked for in hardware that he did not approve. And he also sent me on 2 occasions on a quiet mission to Washington to persuade them to release the attack helicopters that we had paid for, but was not being released because the Senate Foreign Relations Committee of the United States Congress have a role of determining who American weapons, where it should go, and they were claiming that due to human rights concern and a violation, they didn't release them. But I went twice at his instruction, because he didn't want anything that would handicap. So he was not happy, and it's like, do they want me to put on back my uniform and then go and lead the war because for myself? So he believes and trusts that people will perform the responsibility that they were given. And it's always pained him that some did not live up to that. On some, in fact, deliberately or inadvertently too, didn't live up to the trust and expectation they gave them.
That they had trusted in them. So you know, by the way, so the issue of those attack helicopters, I think they were then eventually released under President Trump.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
I think the challenges were under Obama.
No, it's Obama. No, continue under Biden.
Biden. Right.
Yeah, but it was Biden. It was Biden. They were released, but with all the tight guarantees that they will only be used. They wouldn't even allow us to use them to chase and deal with banditries. But the problem was that, you know, as we were making progress in fighting Boko Haram, then they were teaming up with bandits and criminals in the northwest. And then how do you distinguish between the bandits and the terrorists, you know? So it was a very difficult situation, but nonetheless, the point I'm making, honestly, is that whatever the military wanted, he gave them. And it pained him that was. And I think he even said once that, look, we have done our best, maybe, but our best is not good enough. I mean, here's somebody who is self-critical as head of state. But these are the aspect of it that people do not get to see.
I remember too, you know, that talking about the military, that there was actually a time he set up the Needs Assessment Committee.
Correct.
You know, and he had the vice president to chair it, where they looked at what are the things that the military needed, you know, just to back up your point that he really gave the military everything that it needed. And I think in your earlier comments, you said it that if if the problems, if our security problems were to be solved by military means,
they would have been solved. And this idea also, and I really want to emphasize it to us Nigerians, we always avoid responsibility at all levels. So if we have a problem, let the government solve it. If we have a problem, let the president solve it. If there's a problem, it is the army that should solve it. But insecurity in the nation, threats to our peace and security, has to be a collective responsibility at all levels. At the individual levels, at the local government level, at the state levels, so let's all of us working together to address this in the national. Don't forget, at the beginning, people thought terrorists were hala in the north. That's the Yorubas say Gambari, Pafulani, it's like those are outside people killing themselves.
Yeah, who cares?
Who cares? But then the mistake, because we saw that by not coming to and realize it's a national security problem, requiring all of us to do so, it will continue. And you have to have kinetic and non-kinetic attacks to security, which means the military, but also the community. Let me give you another example. Look at even the presence of government. There are so many local government areas. You have one policeman in a whole division with or 10 with no vehicles, no equipment, nothing. You have to have a presence of government everywhere. So whatever arrangement, but there must be presence of government everywhere. That's part of security building, national security. Right. Then you have to provide services for people, for the communities, so that it doesn't make them the terrorists attractive to go and recruit them. To support them. Right. Who is giving them food? Who is giving them?
There were instances that some of the bandits were actually taking care of the community.
Absolutely. So, and of course, all of government, all of the nation's approach. Then our schools, how can we have 9 million or more out-of-school children, and who are pool, available pool to be recruited by bandits and terrorists and criminals to do very bad things. That's what I mean. That it's true that the government has primary responsibility for the maintenance, but it doesn't say exclusive responsibility.
And in any case, talking about the out-of-school children, that is responsibility of the states
and local government.
That he actually made a declaration at the beginning of the second term, where he said that he is going to enforce the laws that says that free education is constitutional from the first year to the 9th year. He was trying to tell the governors that, look, go and get this thing done.
And that's why he also wanted, beyond the state's government, to get money directly to local governments too, so that they will have the money to provide education, health services.
But they pushed back, and he just...
That's one other thing too, that with all due respect, many of the governors of this country are my personal friends, and I have a lot of respect. But
some of them your students, Prof.
Some of them, but at least 2 of them. But the powers are such that and the control over local government. That's also when we talk about federalism and the constitution. I hope we will come to talk about that later. We must also talk about the responsibilities of states not to stifle the local governments of funds,
which is what is happening by and large.
Up to today. Why? Because we'll talk with that later in this program, I hope, because of the process. The governors, with due respect, they determine who goes to state assemblies. They determine who goes to the councillors, and the chairman of local government. They are in charge of the delegates to the party conventions, who will send people to House of Representatives, to the Senate. They also, in most part, determine the delegates who will go for the presidential nominating conventions.
Absolutely.
So, in fact, many times they decide who become ministers because they nominate ministers.
If the president wants peace in the state, he better just listen to the government.
I don't know when it happened, when maybe it's President Obasanjo did a lot of good things, but the fact that he handed the control of political parties to the state governors. There has to be a distinction between the party and the government. I was old enough and interacted enough during the Shagari administration in presidential rule, but the party was separate from the government, And
Chief
Akiloye,
chairman of MPN.
When they met, he chairs and the president sits.
Yeah, in fact, Chief Adwogbe did make the point that he was in the cabinet of Shagari.
Yes.
And that at least on one or two occasions, while the cabinet meeting was going on, presided over by Chief Shagari, that Akiloye would call him as the national chairman of the party, and he would take an excuse to hold the meeting on because the party chairman was calling. Such was the reverence that they have for the party.
And that's why I believe we have to pay attention to the whole political party structure in our country.
Yeah, okay.
And maybe it's a good...
We're going to come to that.
Please.
But I wanted to also raise a few issues about some of the decisions of President Buhari. For instance, state police.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, he wasn't keen around state police. Even before you came in, he wasn't even keen on the issue of restructuring. The party had campaigned, with him as the arrowhead, the flag bearer on this idea of restructuring. And a committee was set up that was led by Governor El-Rufai. Then, but the president just stayed clear from the thing. And then ultimately, when there was insecurity all over the place and everybody was saying, do state police, even the vice president felt, and several times the president went to him, So why, in your own view, was he opposed to state police, Prof?
Because he was a military man. And the military men, if you recall that when they took over power in December 83, January, we then had a very powerful police Inspector General of Police, Adewusi.
Yes.
I must say that one of the first things they do was to weaken the, of course, remove the Adewusi and weaken
Adewusi was the Inspector General of Police in the Second Republic.
Under Shagari. They weakened, they removed him and weakened the police because they saw the police as rival to the power, to the military. And the military believes in command and obedience and centralization of power.
Yeah.
So the longer we continue that, even beyond the end of military rule, of centralization, all-powerful federal government. Now, but there's a second dimension, which is that those of us, I grew up under the local authority police. In Ilorin province, and the president, who was in a sense our contemporary, grew up also in this local authority police, and the atrocities that occurred so that reminder. So I think that's what was constraining him. However, if you can persuade him, that will have and nobody has succeeded in persuading him, there'll be no guarantees, for how to prevent governors, the all-powerful governors, from using the state police for party or personal advantage. He may have been persuaded. But look at the record. Go and look at the state electoral commissions. Look at what they have become. What is happening there.
It's as if the ruling party must win all the... just finished the one in Lagos State and, APC cleared everything.
By all means, it's a joke. I'm bold enough to say it's a joke, and then imagine now if they have state police to boot, state electoral commission, state police, the checks and balances at the state level are simply not there.
Yeah.
The federal arrangement is not perfect, for sure, federal government, but the checks and balances that still exist at the federal level. For example, the president of Nigeria cannot just do what he likes with the National Assembly, some are more controlled than others, but he has to take account of the National Assembly. They have to confirm his ministers, ambassadorial appointment, his budget.
Look at what happened under the leadership of Senator Bukola Saraki and
for 7 months, it wasn't a good thing. 7 months they held up the budget. That is a fact. Okay? So no president can just ignore the National Assembly. Then he has also a federal bureaucracy. A federal permanent secretary still means something. There's a process, or at the state level, there's no permanent secretary to be checked. There's no assembly to be a check on the government. There's state judiciaries. They are and in sorry state. And then, of course, at the state level, there's no media that can be
there's no media focus.
So we must really rethink, the checks and balances at the state level. We must ensure that state police will not be used to perpetuate a ruling party in power. Look at even under Buhari, the last 3 years that joined up. You were longer there. But his party was defeated in Edo State. He was defeated in Anambra State. And he congratulated the governors. Yeah. He called, I remember in the case of Edo, he got the governor there, Obaseki. Yes. Yeah. And he said, congratulations, although I'm congratulating reluctantly because my party lost. but congratulations, congratulations. So, and part of it about Buhari too is like, please excuse the comparisons, like converts to religion. Sometimes they become even more fervent because he was a convert to this democratic process. Yes, and he went through it 4 times. He tried 4 times to be president, and went to the Supreme Court. Each time he won and lost. So he believes that, okay, this is the system that we have chosen. This is the system to which he has become a convert. Let him show it concretely by not obstructing and in fact, congratulating the winner of a state gubernatorial election, even though he went against his party. Yeah. And he said, I take responsibility. I'm the leader, the facto leader of the party, but I want to congratulate you. And he invited a large delegation from Edo. I remember I was there and I saw it. So those are the kind of things that are not as well known about this man as it's not perfect. I mean, I'm not trying to paint a picture of perfection. No human being is perfect, and then you see a president must be judged by the circumstance of his time, also. But nonetheless, he likes to do things through a system, through a political process, and through the discussion, argument, which I thought
it's interesting that you said that that the president should be judged by the circumstances. I just remind you of what Bishop Martin Kuka. Okay, I don't know whether you read his comment.
What did he say?
Kuka, he said that people should not judge Buhari by his 8 years in office. That they have to see beyond, the man, because the circumstances of the office, just like you said, shouldn't be the sole,
Let me take that point further. Let me give 2 examples. Here's a product of traditional institution. Yeah. But he didn't like many traditional rulers in Nigeria. I think I can count, I won't name them now on television. Okay. But there are only about 6 traditional rulers that he cares about. Only about 6. I think about 2 in the southwest and about 4 in the north as a whole. 2 is part of the elite, because you can't be general in the army and not be elite, but he never really associated. He was more the Talakawa. He's almost class suicide in that sense. That he's identified with the Talakawa. And they honestly, they show their fidelity to him in the votes that he got consistently by the Talakawa.
Except in 2007, that was the only time he got low than 10 million. Of course, everybody knew what happened in 2007.
Precisely.
In 2003, 2011, and then 2015,
and then 2019. And when he left office, I accompanied him to Daura. And the following day, the Durbar that they said the people turned out.
Wow.
To show that May 2023 when we let off in Daura. Now look at his funeral. Right. On Tuesday. The huge number of people who showed their respect because they identified with him. So here is a member of the elite that has contempt for the elite. You have somebody grown up from the traditional institution that actually dislikes some of the traditional rulers. And dislike is the word, because sometimes he will tell me that, look at you princes and all of that, you go on, why are you interested in terminal appointments, like being a The moment you are emir, people are praying for death because the princes, if you don't die, they won't get the position. Yeah. And not only that, he didn't really approve of the way in which some of the leading traditional rulers of this country have been carried along.
Yeah. It's very, very true. I mean, I think about a week ago, Babacha Lawal, was making the same point that even actually when they were doing the primaries, when they had formed APC, they had formed the merger, that, it took the current president to even speak on his behalf to some of the elites who felt, that, don't want this guy coming back, so that President Tinubu had to use his social skills to sell his candidates. I also know that, there are some very notable, whose names we won't mention, notable northern leaders who were saying that, hey, no, don't bring Buhari back.
They didn't like him, so it was the simple. They didn't like him, he didn't like them. With very few. With few. And it was difficult to mutual dislike and suspicion, And because he's taken sides, that he has taken side with the masses of the people, and he doesn't like anybody and anything that will hurt the masses of the people. Really.
One important thing that I would like to get your perspective about is some of the things that I observed, So, for instance, when he was head of state, military head of state, it was very, tough. Let's just say that. Yeah. Very, very tough. Unyielding, unbending, And then when he became president, we see some kind of mellowing down. Mm-hmm. Now, I have heard him tell this story in the villa. I'm sure that you'll be aware of this. And I'd like to take your perspective. He says that, when he was military head of state, he came in, to deal with the situation. All the politicians that were allegedly involved in corruption, he gathered all of them.
2,500.
He
put them in the detention.
To deal with them. And that, at the end of the day, that he himself ended up in house arrest for 3 years. I think, in my view, that house arrest, he felt as if this is not supposed to be how it should end. I think that affected him and he mellowed down a little bit from that. This is my perspective. What do you think, Prof?
Well, first of all, he got older. He was, was about 42 when he became head of state. By the time he was president, he was
69 when he came in.
When he came in. Yeah, too. And also, he must reflect on the injustice of just presuming, as he said, prove everybody guilty until they prove themselves innocent. Whereas our system now, at the time he came back, until the state proves you guilty and their system and structures. So what you said, though, but it's also part of it that it's patently unfair that for him, he said, look, that, all right, he was removed, but then put in detention for 3 years plus. Yes. No charges. No charges. His mother died. He couldn't go and bury her. So like the injustice of it, obviously they weighed very heavily on him. Although people didn't sympathize, a number of people didn't sympathize. Say, well, he was locked for 3 years. How about he locked us up? Yeah. But that was a different circumstance. That.
And there are a lot of people who still hold it that, look, my father died, he died in the prison, became blind, and all kinds of things that people would bring up.
And but ultimately, I've also made the point earlier that he has become a Democrat. And I believe that he really feels he has to do things differently and respects rule of law and just sense of justice. And in any case, what did that locking people up with Thatcher, what did it achieve in the end? Everybody was released in 1985
by military president Babangida.
And then it was business as usual. So why don't you take
while he was under arrest?
In fact, one of the most painful episodes, I didn't witness it myself, but one of the children told me that on reflection, when he was detained, and one of the few times they allowed his family to see him, I think he was detained somewhere in Benin or somewhere. And he told them, he said, you see, look at life. That a few months ago, I was head of state of Nigeria. Good everywhere I wanted, I visited in pomp and glory. He said, I'm not allowed to cross that gate. I'm not able to cross that gate of this house.
Wow.
See? So that kind of reflection weighs heavily that, that injustice, have a way of
course, weighing down all of us, when we are the victims of it.
Exactly. And he became a converted, to do things by the process. They used to call him also Baba Go Slow. Yeah. But he's a very deliberative person.
One of the things that I noticed, is that just to show that he was in charge of his cabinet.
Yes.
Anytime he presided,
okay.
I attended a few times, but I attended more when the vice president
of course was in charge.
I noticed that, whenever the vice president presides, everybody gets to get a view, and everybody is just
rank was almost out of control.
But when the vice president, of course, people spoke, but you better know what you are saying, and people are more restrained. So that tells me that, okay, the man may have mellowed down, but...
But he's in charge. He's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the... That aspect of him, people underrated. Yes, every president, whether it's civilian or military, under our constitution, becomes commander-in-chief. Yeah. But he's a commander-in-chief democratically elected. Not once, re-elected twice. That gives you the confidence, plus, of course, the military background.
Yeah. And so talking about influence, what's your own perspective? What's your experience about people influencing him outside of the formal structures of government?
No, that's a very good question, Laudu. And I will address it honestly. And I want to, and on record, that they say there's a cabal, or a cabal. Yeah. There was. But every government has cabal, is what they call them.
Every family has
they call the kitchen cabinet. Yeah. So they may call them think tank. Obasanjo, in his previous, and even especially, he had a group of people, Aboyades of this world and others, and who, a small group of people who is the nature of the office of president, that they must have some people in and out of government that they can lay their hair down, talk to freely. So some have more powers than others, but every government, I'm making bold to say, has a cabal of one kind or another, whatever name is called. So there was. Now, I was in there in I was minister in 1984-85, but I wasn't privy to why he was removed by his colleagues as head of state. They put him there. But one of the reasons I'm told, and I have to qualify, I'm just told, was that they were resenting, the military people were resenting the fact that President Buhari was now getting a lot of, the head of state Buhari was getting a lot of advice and second-guessing decisions of government, of his military colleagues, the Supreme Military Council. To be honest, I don't know whether that's fact or not. I wasn't privy to it. But for me though, it's and I want to really emphasize this. They may have influence. Sometimes those so-called exaggerate their own influence. They know with Buhari, they know their limits. So go and check. They know when not to push him. But they know him well as a human being. They know his weak moment. They know his strong moment. They know when to smuggle.
And those things are very, very significant. Because you can make a move where you see that, okay, there's an opportunity.
And then they will just, because they know him, they interact with him informally. Let me also even put something again on record. When I came as chief of staff to the president, he made a statement. Public, he said, all memos must go through the chief of staff before coming to him. By the way, even the vice president, to his credit, almost passes all his memos through me. I know. And several ministers. But there are people who still got their memos behind, and this was part of this complexity of the president too. Is the one who said it. But still, some people find ways to because
because they know how
they know the weak point, they know who to use and it never stopped them. But but the advantage I had is that whatever, if you get your memos through the web, when it comes back, I'm the one that he will have to convey this. And if I feel strongly about this, I'll go back to him and say, Mr. President, excuse me, this one. Now, you have to pick your battles, because you're not president. And you can't fight every decision that comes without your knowledge. Otherwise, you lose out and you become ineffective. But I know several times, if I feel strongly, you go back to him and he will change that decision that didn't come through. But he never stopped. Those people
pushing.
And that's the influence those so-called Cabal they use is to go through that route of going behind the chief of staff. And sometimes too, and this is fine, you tell me, oh, you know, Professor, you are just a bloody civilian, and you have been away from this country for too long anyway. So sometimes you don't appreciate the dynamics, particularly the political. And I must say on record, he protected me a lot sometimes, because I would like to go in that direction and say, no, let this go.
Interesting.
Because he has other sources of information, you might even call pressure, and that makes him. But ultimately, and then I'm a political scientist by training, that ultimately he's the one elected. It's his name. Nobody will remember who these Cabal were many years from now, or who the chief of staff was. But Buhari's name is the administration, and you have to give him that space to conduct it. He was the one elected.
It's interesting, that you made this point. I mean, being much younger and more idealistic, some of us that worked around the vice president on some of the issues that we felt, I don't know, how is the president doing this? How is the president doing it? And then, of course, at times the VP will be convinced with our view. We will go to the president. In fact, he says to us that the president normally says to him that anytime he comes to him with some of those complaints, that it's like his time of penance.
Yes.
Just to show that it took those things very seriously. But that ultimately, and VP used to tell us that ultimately, it's the president's call. That is it is name that is on the ballot.
True.
People will remember that this was Buhari administration. So ultimately, you just have to let him do it.
And because it's still responsibility. Don't forget, and this president, Buhari, he ran for president 4 times. He visited each and every one of the 774 local governments in the country.
True.
And so, I mean, and then was re-elected. So how can you, an advisor or a member of the Cabal, have to tell you must do this the way I want? Who are you?
The interesting thing is that a lot of people felt that your coming here was, and you don't have to comment on this about Prof. That your coming was actually to also checkmate the Cabal. That is also out there.
That I don't know, but I know that
you wanted to assert that all this Cabal that you guys are talking about, I can do things by myself.
Well, the only thing I can say about that is simply that he didn't consult anybody, and I will not mention the name. But when people were congratulating me, when I was appointed chief of staff, there's one very senior Nigerian, I'm not going to mention him, he said 2 things I'm going to tell you, Ibrahim. One, that the Buhari in 1984, 85 is not the same Buhari that you'll be working for in 2023, Circumstances have changed. That's number one. Number 2, he said, but I know one thing, he chose you himself. He consulted nobody. Because if he had consulted the so-called Cabal, you would not be the one that would be chief of staff. Because they believe this is a position, they must install somebody there whom they can control, who will carry out the instructions. And they know Gambari is not somebody they can just tell anything to.
Of course.
Follow. So even the Cabal, whatever you call them, they try to carry you along.
Of course.
Because they didn't install you.
Absolutely.
And you are not answerable to them.
We got the boss, Prof, very clearly, that your coming in was clearly a move that the president needed to move to show that he's his own man.
And he chose this man. He said, go and bring me Gambari. He enjoy himself in the United Nations, trying to solve other countries' problem. Let him come and suffer with me here in Nigeria. But that's the kind of that he takes on some issues.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't consult anyone.
Yeah.
He just goes ahead and makes it done.
All right. So because of our time, let's talk about idea of federalism.
Yes.
You know, some of your views about the selection process in the political parties. You had made the point at the launch of the book of Madam Cabal that we have to pay attention to the political process. So can you clarify? I mean, just give us a little bit more detail about what you mean, and then we close with federalism. Okay,
good. No, first, you know, I feel that the strength of every democracy lies in the organization of the political parties and political process. Yeah. It is true that in a presidential system, once the president is elected, then obviously he becomes the de facto head of the political parties. That even take the United States, where we borrow their system. President Trump has taken over control of the Republican Party completely,
totally,
and subjugated them to even all the mandarins, the Bushes, the Clinton, the Bushes particularly, and the establishment of the Republican, they are nowhere.
Completely vanquished.
Yes. So you have to make allowance for that. But I'm saying at the grassroots level, we must pay attention to the organization of political parties and make the political parties closer to the people, the electorate, not just become what they have become, the vehicle just to get political power and to use it the way they are. Because then, if we don't pay attention, let these political to cut the distance between them and the people, you know, so that they can believe this is our party. You know, people used to be, again, looking back, although that was a parliamentary system, and then the First Republic, people used to believe in action group. This is our party. People used to believe MPC. This is our party. NCNC. You can even distinguish between the parties, what they stand for. You know, ideological parties, and they even pay party dues.
People had cards and they tell that this is how much I paid. Yeah.
So you feel that this is yours, and you therefore feel you can hold accountable the management of the party, the leadership of the party. So that's, I really want us to really think very seriously, and the elites of this country, the national elite, to really pay attention to the organization of parties, to cut the gap between them and the people, and so that they will be now the ones to decide who represents them, you know, at this local government level, at the state level, at the national level, you know, National Assembly level, and at the federal level. That's what I'm saying now. So, and I think that's been neglected over. Now, don't forget too, because of long years, prolonging of military rule. I mean, the first thing they do, suspend the constitution, political party is gone, then you have to start again. And to make matters even more complicated, President Babangida even had decreed structures of political parties. A little to the right, a little to the left. He meant well, because he wanted them to be ideologically based, so that people have to choose because of the political, the ideological orientation, and so that the influence of tribe, religion, region will be less. But still, the fact that these are decreed, these are structures handed down, to me, it should be from the bottom up. That is right. And failure to do that, believe me, we are not going to be able to control the people that come through those processes. You know, then the godfatherism will become the principal means of selection. Or the use of money will become critical. Because if you don't believe me, just go and find out how much it will cost anyone to be governor of any state, to rise to be candidate of either of the major political parties. So either you have the money, or you have to be indebted to, or you are indebted to those who have the money.
Godfather. Thank you so much, Prof. Our time is fast spent. I know that, you know, if just 1 minute for this, that your name was advertised as one of the major speakers at this political summit of the Patriots. So I wanted to ask you, you know, now of course they met this week in Abuja. If there's one thing that you think ought to change in the Nigerian Constitution, Just one thing. There are several things. What do you think is the power?
Decentralization of power. Decentralization of power. And responsibility. That has to be changed, so that power must be devolved to the constituent part, however we define it. Look at the United Kingdom. You have the Parliament in Westminster, yes, but you have the Scottish Parliament. True. You have the Welsh Parliament, the Irish Parliament. And so you have devolution of power, devolution of responsibility, devolution of resources to go by it. So it's only, I think, terminology we hang up on restructuring, true federalism, but essentially it's how to devolution of power. That is what, and this is my final point. Constitution by itself is not, in my view, even the most fundamental. The fundamental is constitutionalism. That is the commitment to a constitutional process. A constitutional process. So that checks and balances that we've been talking about, method of choosing the leadership, political education of the masses, so that, because you can have a constitution, but if nobody is committed to it, it becomes a piece of paper. And the United Kingdom, again, has no written constitution anywhere. I'm told that the Cuban constitution is a few pages, not Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, that are own. But it's the commitment to the political process and to fairness, to equity, to justice. And so that you don't have concentration of power anywhere in a federal system. Thank
you so much, Prof, for your views. Thank you for your contribution. Over the years, I remember that you became minister in your 30s, and you've kept on giving national service up until your 80s. That is quite commendable, and thank you for everything that you represent in this country. And thank you for supporting President Buhari at the end of his presidency. He needed somebody like you, and he got it. And thank you for coming to Inside Sources.
It's my pleasure.
All right. And there you have it, another edition of Inside Sources. Like we always say, Nigeria will prevail. It means that Nigeria will win because we will not relent. And we believe that one day we get a good break. My name is Laolu Akonde. Thank you for watching. And by the grace of God, I'll see you at the next edition.